Whether it's a divorce, a breakup, a friendship that fizzles out, or an estrangement within a family, the pain that we're going to feel inside of us and the struggle to fully forgive, to let go of resentments and judgments and move on, that's obviously a process that we need to revisit as mindfully and intentionally as we can whenever we notice that we aren't fully over it. And how do we know we're not fully over it? Basically, the way that we feel about the situation and the thoughts that we have about the other individual and so forth. So for me, what happened recently was someone who I used to work with and we decided to part ways came up in my mind again, which that happens occasionally. And I noticed that I kind of had this resentful, judgmental essence in me, just this feeling, this vibe that just I've felt it before, and I don't think badly and wish anything negative on that person, but at the same time there I was noticing that there's something that's still unresolved within me and wanting to take that responsibility for myself. I was just thinking about how I wanted to finally say, okay, I'm going to just take some time. If I'm noticing it, and I usually would notice it, think about that person for a while and then put it away and not really revisit it for a while. So for me to finally say, okay, I'm going to actually take the time to say, okay, God, I want to really, really understand what's going on inside of me. What are the things that I can actually do to just finally make peace? So you might be going through something similar, and what I'd like to share with you is that the first thing I think that is so important is that we should not judge those thoughts, those emotions that we have about the experience and about how we feel we were treated by the other person and so forth, because that's the pain that we have experienced from that situation, and all we can do is acknowledge that it still hurts. For me, that's the first thing that I did. I just said, there's something going on for me to say, even now, this is like 2 years later, that it still bothers me. Something still bothers me. And what I always try to do is to bring it to God, to bring it to spirit and say, with all of my effort, whatever I'm thinking, whatever my emotions are, I just want to understand myself better, but not by like thinking it through, but more like saying, you already know what I'm feeling. You already know where my thoughts are, but I don't have an awareness of what is resistant within me. What am I resisting? Because obviously I'm not crossing paths with this person. That person is not actively doing anything that is going to be affecting me. And yet I'm finally at the point where I'm like, okay, I am willing to feel differently. And that's what I was telling God first and foremost. I really know that this has been recurring, and I'm finally ready to tell you, look, I'm willing to feel differently. I'm willing to feel differently, and I don't really know how you're going to help me shift, but I know you will. I just know. That part is because of the many times before when I've, brought something to God and just said, I want to see this differently, but not like I don't want to think negatively about it. See, that's the thing that I think the whole, think more positively, or this idea of you shouldn't have that feeling, can actually backfire. For me, I've learned to just say, God, I give it to you. You already know what's in my heart. You already know where I'm at, and if that's how I feel, that's how I feel. In fact, in the video I just released recently about vibration, I've talked about how you can't fake vibration. So there would be no way for me to come to God and do anything but be completely honest, because that's where I'm at. And so God already knew that, but it was like me saying, okay, I want to address this. And for me, the first step was to just say, okay, I know that I'm willing to feel differently, but right now I'm noticing that this is still how I feel. I still feel resentful. I still feel judgmental. I have kind of this bad taste in my mouth anytime I consider that person. And yet I started to tell myself, you know what? If I'm resisting something, I feel like that's because all I'm doing is remembering maybe the ending of the relationship. What about the other parts of the relationship? And I started to tell myself, you've got to be willing to give the other person credit for the things that they brought to the situation, because there's got to be positives there. And I was feeling like maybe I wasn't giving them credit for that. And then also I thought to myself, you have to give yourself credit, because there are elements that you are have never resolved for yourself. So in my situation, the person that I was working with, I had first had a casual relationship and then eventually started working for her. And during that time, I can't say that I didn't like any of the experience. So I have to admit for myself that, okay, there were parts of that relationship that served me. And as I was out in the garden, the day that I said, okay, I really want to feel better and I really want to give this to you, God, and understand a little bit more of where am I in resistance. I'm working in the garden, and the thought came to me as I was just saying, please help me to understand, what is it that I'm missing? What is it that I'm not even giving credit for? And I remember there was a specific time when I was in a lot of personal turmoil, and I was having lunch with this lady, and she shared some perspective that nobody really would have told me, but she did, and that's because of the background she has and the experiences that she's had. And in that moment, I literally was like, oh my gosh, I never really gave credit for that, and I was just kind of talking to God and just saying, I understand now that that's something I never even showed you how much I was grateful for. And I certainly never really showed her that I was really, really grateful for that perspective that she shared with me. And, she's just being a friend at lunch, telling me something in response to the problems I was having. But at the same time, when I think about how impactful that was, and absolutely how it made a difference in so many aspects ever since then, if I think about it, I have to attribute it to her. I have to attribute it to the things that she said then, in how I might approach that in a more vibrational and spiritual way. So all in all, that was a big aha for me in asking God to help me focus on or recognize where my resistance was. And the other aspect I thought of when I said, well, what am I not giving myself credit for? The other aspect was that I never really felt like we jived, she and I. I felt like we could be acquaintances and so forth, but I realized that I just never really felt like there was a connection, heart to heart. And maybe that was just on my side. Maybe she felt that there was. But what I realized was that when you don't be true to yourself, when, all this time you knew that there was just not quite the right thing between you, and yet you ignored it and you ignored it and you ignored it, or you compensated for it, then, at some point, like as I was working in the garden the other day, I feel like you have to come to a point that you say, well, I knew. I always kind of sensed it. So I had to forgive myself for not being more true to myself at that time. But I'm not saying that I suffered in the whole relationship until I finally said, okay, I don't want to work with you anymore. And I think I want to close the door to this relationship. So I think that can apply in a lot of situations, divorces and breakups, and, just where we sometimes think every interaction is supposed to last forever. And, you've seen those things where it says, some people are in your life for a reason, for a season, or a lifetime, and bringing it back to God and just asking for, what am I not fully forgiving or fully resolving, so that I can think back to the situation and see it in its fullness, rather than in only the part that hurt me or the part that disappointed me. That was an important thing that I have been working on, and I'm not completely done with it yet, but I definitely have been saying to God over and over again, as I think about the things that I'm revisiting, I'm asking, please help me, no matter what, to catch any ego and any self-righteousness and claim it for what it is, because I'm not sure what parts of the way I'm looking at the situation are my own ego and my own self-righteousness. And while I'm not going to bash that about myself, that's just the honest truth of where I'm at, or how I'm processing something. I really want to know that I keep bringing that back to God and asking for help with that most important aspect, because I don't want to be blinded by that, by my own ego, or the part that I feel I was righteous about, because I really do want to trust that the entire experience, God was always with me and God was always in it. And there must have been purpose in the relationship and in how it had unfolded, for the years that I knew this person. So I definitely hope and pray that I'll continue in this process until I really feel like it's come to its conclusion. Now that I've started, when I have my down times, when I have quiet times, I've definitely been praying a lot and just talking to God and asking for that kind of direction, and just being curious, just saying, like, I'm willing to feel differently. I'm willing to see this differently. I'm not exactly sure where my resistances are, and yet I want to be gentle with myself and also fair with the other person, in thoughts of the other person, and allowing for the fact that there's purpose in all of it. And I'm more interested now in coming to the place of feeling that I've resolved that, so that I feel the gratitude for what was and what it gave me, and also the ability to say, and I can see and give myself credit for the things that maybe I brought to the situation that were positive. So basically, to see the positives and heal the negatives, heal the painful, resentful, disappointed aspects that I guess are still a little bit in me. And that means continuing to process it, but in this way of, bringing my thoughts, my emotions to Spirit, to God, and seeking for that kind of mind, heart, and spirit coordination, because I know God can help me in ways that if I was just staying in my brain and thinking it over and over, I'd never be able to feel the gentling in my heart. So what I want to leave you with today, if you are a person, dealing with any kind of relational issue that you feel you've kind of closed the chapter on something, but at the same time you are in that same feeling, noticing that when things come back up, or you revisit the relationship or memories, that you have that bad taste in your mouth, I just want to encourage you to stay open. Stay open. Recognize that that's okay, that's where you're at, that's how you're feeling, but stay open so that you can intuitively receive the kind of inspiration that will deepen your sense of balance, your balance with yourself, within yourself, and then also your sense of balance with God, with the universe, and with the whole movement of all life, because we're meant to continue to move forward, to understand that, that was a phase of my life, that was a season of my life, but maybe not a part of the entirety of my physical experience. So when we have to let things go and so forth, I hope that we can stay open and really spend the time acknowledging that's where I'm at, but I want to feel better. And I really hope that that will encourage you today if that's what you're going through. I will see you in the next video, and I hope that you will be well.